Watching the conversation on Lagos television last month, precisely August, the Honorable Minister of Education, Professor Tari Rahman, set the 18 years benchmark for WAEC and, of course, NECO, as well as university admission in the country. And, of course, he stressed the need for the full implementation of the 6334 educational system. Since he made that statement, different reactions trailed his statement, and many have criticized the federal government for coming up with such idea. Is it right or wrong, and is it going to do our children any good? These are some of the questions we intend to ask our guests on the program this morning. We have with us on the conversation this morning Ambassador Dr. Eniola Ajayi, former Commissioner for Education, Science and Technology, Ekiti State. It's good to have you.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, I think the best place to start this morning is to ask you if there are indeed merits in this pronouncement made by the Honorable Minister of Education, Professor Tari Rahman, as regards the 18 years benchmark for admission into university, as well as writing of WAEC and NECO exams.
Okay, I think the right thing to say is not the pronouncement, the policy.
Okay.
Are there merits to the policy? Definitely. There are a number. And I would like us to start with that. And I will start with my own personal story before I go into the actual scientific reasons why 18 years makes sense. I was one of those students who was gifted in primary school, and because of that, I went to secondary school from primary 5. I was 10, but I wasn't even the youngest in my set. I had people I was older than. And when I got there, I played a lot. I was not serious at all. So I went from being a very brilliant student to being a very playful student. And the immaturity took its toll on me to the point that when I wrote my first WAEC, the result was not fantastic at all. But on the contrary, somebody I was older than, my friend of blessed memory, Dr. NECO, she was younger than me, but she got grade 1 in her first WAEC. But once I realized that there was a problem, I sat up, repeated from 5, and I came up as first in mock exam. So they knew that I was going to scale my school cert. But you know life, as it happened, most of the results of my center was cancelled. So that meant I had to do WAEC again. But this time, with my mock results, I was actually admitted into Oscar Sikare, Ondo State College of Arts and Science, which is why it cannot be one size fits all in education. My Western or British principal at the time thought that, look, this girl is too brilliant to be allowed to waste another year. So they took me for A-levels in Oscars with my mock result. And I now retook school cert. And of course I passed, and I was able to go into University of Benin. But in spite of all of this, I graduated at 21, which is really the issue. That's number one of why this it actually makes sense. And then my daughter, I was speaking to her. To the glory of God now, she has PhD. She got her PhD at 29. But she said, Mommy, I definitely regret going to university early. Yes. I asked that before coming to this program. She said, it would have been nice if I was a bit more mature. So there was a lot of pressure on her. She went to university at a very early age, very brilliant as well. But to the glory of God, we survived, but not without scars. You know, it's emotional toll and maturity. So there are a lot of benefits to going to university at 18.
Right. Dr. Niola, before you go on to mention some of this merits, I'd just like us to backtrack a bit, because you've given your own personal story. You've also given the story of your daughter. And so here, do parents really understand where this policy is coming from, taking a look at some of the merits you'll talk about now, because again, it feels like the pressure is really coming from parents rather than the children.
That's even where I will come to when we talk about what the issues are with this policy.
Okay.
It's not the parents per se.
Right.
It's the entire structure of our society. Let me tell you, what starts children from going to school early is because of the lack of appropriate and coordinated childcare. In most places around the world, when you have a couple, one person's earnings cannot take care of the family. So the husband and the wife end up going to work. So if they're going to go to work, they need to leave their child with someone.
Right.
We know the dangers of leaving your child with, in quotes, a house help that is just how many years old themselves. So if this is the case, then we need somewhere to take the children. That was how we started all this preschool, creche, kindergarten. And because it's not properly structured, and because of the way we are, the kind of mentality we have as Nigerians, if your child is going to a kindergarten and they're only painting things and coming back home,
you will complain.
Nigerians will complain, after all
They're
the
not
money,
teaching them anything.
yeah, they're not teaching them anything. After all the money I paid, and I was talking to my friend on Sunday, she told me that one of our nieces came from England at some time when our children were still young. And she couldn't read anything, she couldn't write anything. She was just painting. Because they were just painting. But she said when she came back a few years after, she had cut off, if not overtaken, her peers here.
Yeah.
Because by the time structured education started, she was ready to do it, to take it in, and she did well. And the kind of child that still took a gap year before going to read medicine in Imperial College.
Wow.
That's how brilliant that child is. So these are the issues, the fundamental issues are there. I will come to it. I just want us to talk about what the merits are first, because it's good to know that there are merits to this. The issue is, how is it now being enforced and implemented without checking the policies that had been put in place, or the situation where we're at, where everything needs to be well thought through, and we come to a conclusion of how to proceed as a nation.
Okay. So talking about structure now, this particular age benchmark, can't we take it from the beginning, the primary school, by setting a particular age limit at which a child can be enrolled at the primary school, instead of waiting till you are in secondary school and about to enter the university?
You have just mentioned it, but I insist on saying what the good things are about age 18 before we now talk about what the difficulties are of implementing it this way.
Okay, so we'll hold on to Ajibola's question while you talk about the merits.
Okay, so the first one is academic readiness. Children are very mature and they have good cognitive abilities once they have attained the age of 18. Their foundational knowledge is more balanced, more secure, more robust at that age. So they can confront the structures of university education. Believe me sincerely, if you are not ready to do university, it can be a very daunting task. And it even still affected me when I went to do my master's in England. When I got to Moorfields Eye Hospital, and my peers and contemporaries were talking about research, they were saying things, you know, making references to things as though I knew them. I was shocked and I was like, really? But of course, knowing me,
you have to go brave it.
yes, now, the real bravado. One of my lecturers said, if you can't convince them, just confuse them. So, of course, I rose up to the task and I carried along and I was able to survive. But the thing is, I was in an environment where I was with the people who actually wrote the books we were reading. Colleagues who had written books, the ABC of eye care, who was in the same research institute with me. So it was difficult. So being ready is very important. The second one is social and emotional maturity. Many of the people going to university now are just children who can easily be swayed by bad influence and bad company, real peer pressure. So that's one. Another one. So and being emotionally stable. Some children need real careful handling and really understanding that each child differs from the other.
Right.
Is so crucial even for parents. Children are so different that they need to be properly understood, to be properly trained. So we need to understand that about children, and they cannot attain that maturity at 14 or 15 when their children are going to school now, because I ended up going to university at about maybe 4 years in university. I went early because after losing 2 years, I still graduated at 21. So the other one is the legal considerations. In countries especially where a child is supposed to, you know, once a child enters university, they don't tell you their results in the US or in the UK or anywhere outside Nigeria.
Because they believe
that
they're adults.
Yeah, they're adults, and if they don't want to share their result with you, it's okay. And even though you are paying their school fees, that's your business.
You have to pay it.
That just you pay it. That's your obligation. That's what you wanted to do. So please, don't hold us to it. So children need to be 18 for legal considerations, especially in Nigeria now. They were starting student loan. You don't give a loan to a child that's below the age of 18 and tell them to take responsibility. Right. So although parents can co-sign and all that, there are ways out of this, but this is also another reason why the age 18 makes sense. Then for long-term career and personal development, it's good for a child to enter at 18 plus 4 years, and that will give us like 22. And then they get into the workspace. You know, it's easier for that child to cope than a child who entered university at 16 or 15, and then they enter the workplace at 19. It's really a tough call for children. So they've not really had a chance to be children before they became adults overnight. So these are the issues. Then the other issue is cultural and societal norms. When you are in any group, you're like peer group. Even now, it's evident to me that I'm really, even though I'm almost 60, I'm actually well above my peers in terms of the fact that a lot of them have celebrated 60 like 2 years ago. A lot of them are celebrating 60 this year, and my own is still next year. Okay. Yeah, so this kind of thing means that you are dealing with an age range that is not yours if you are taken in too early. Wow. Then the last point I want to make for the merit of it is that it actually ensures that children don't burn out quickly. Let me explain this a bit more. You know, when you go to university in the US, you often hear things like, there's a major in this and a minor in that, and all that kind of stuff. And then they decide later. You are allowed to enter university and not really know what you want to study. And that is also why somebody can do fine art in the United States of America and still read medicine. Because once you are able to pass the particular test to go into medical school, you are admitted and you are allowed to do it. Wow. So this means that you have the wherewithal to decide what you want to do before you actually do it.
You have options.
You have options, and then it's flexible. I remember my daughter, when she first got into UCLA, she was like, she was going to do, what's it called? Like economics as a major and then a minor in languages or something. After a while, my daughter decided to major in languages, comparative literature, without telling us anymore, because she was raised by a set of people, because when she was in Olashore, he was like, oh, your daughter should do science, because she was coming first, getting A's, and she said she didn't want to study any of those things. And I agreed, because I've always believed in letting children do what they want to do, because that's when they will not get tired of doing it. But if you force them, there'll be a problem. So she came from that background. And then of me saying, you need to do a professional course so that if you don't get a job, you can employ yourself.
Right.
You know, so by the time she wanted to take a decision to change and not do economics anymore, she didn't tell any of us.
She made
But
her choice.
she made her choice, and
Right.
today, to the glory of God, she has PhD in comparative literature. That's what she wants to do,
Right.
and that's the point. So that maturity to not burn out before they finish,
important.
it's very important.
Okay, so back to my question now.
Yes, so please ask me again. And then I will answer.
Instead of setting 18 as the minimum age for you to write your WAEC or enter the university, why not start from the primary school level?
Exactly. So that's what's wrong with this, with this pronouncement. Not that the policy in itself is wrong. It's that we are taking it from the top
And not from the
and not from the bottom. It has to be a holistic approach, because there's no way that children would have come this far and they're now 14 or 15 in SS3. And you say they cannot write the exam for which they had spent 6 years waiting to
getting
write.
ready for.
So what will they do? They said they should go to vocational schools. Which vocational schools do we have?
How many?
How many are there? Then we don't have A-levels anymore
Yeah.
in our public schools. This is a place where they could have gone to do 2 years before proceeding. So we need to put those structures in place before we can enforce this nice policy, in quotes. You know what I mean? It's a good policy, but it's not well thought out. It needs to be thoroughly examined, all stakeholders involved. What are we going to do with childcare so that children don't go to, because I didn't want my first daughter to go to school before age 3, but there was nowhere for her to go. I ended up taking her to a creche
Right.
and to do stuff because I needed to go to work. So we need to start from not just that level. We need to do proper childcare in our different neighborhoods, a well-structured one where children will be safe and parents can go and pick their children. Then we need to also even look at even government policies that will make it such that, I know that new mothers can do half day, but it means that we must give time for women who have children below the age of 3 to have flexible working hours for our mothers. That's the only way we can make this work. So when we've looked at it from the beginning, then we will look at the minimum age for entering secondary school, by which time once you complete, you will be almost 18. Or better still, we'll let children who are able to complete whenever they can, but they do A-levels for 2 years before they can go to university for maturity. So these are things we have to put in place before we just do a blanket ban. We can't just make a pronouncement that will cancel maybe 3 or 4 years of some children's lives.
And I like the fact that, I mean, you did say that this should be a bottom approach rather than coming from the top. Of course, government schools can be regulated, but we do have a lot of private schools that are also in education, some not because they are capable, some because they are in it for business. And so part of what we also need to look at will be for government to also say how this can be regulated. You also talked about, you know, you having to write, you know, not finishing, not going to primary, primary 6. A lot of that is happening at the moment where schools will say, oh, they're gifted, whether or not they skip primary 6, go to GSS 1 from there. Even nursery schools are doing
double promotion
from KG to primary. And so again, we've realized that these things are not well formed from that part. So what would you require government to do in this particular situation so that, you know, we're not just scratching the surface, we're looking at this from that very bottom?
All right, thank you very much. Let me first of all say that government still has oversight on private schools.
Right.
And the only thing we need to do is enforce those things. There's so many things that are being done in Nigeria that are not right. Like maybe some schools teaching our children in pounds and pennies rather than naira and kobo. That should not happen at all. So I would support that children should not be allowed to go to secondary school from primary 5, no matter how brilliant you are. But the thing is, there's no one size fits all in education. That's why even in those countries where they seemingly have 18 years, it's not that they just like the age 18. They've done it in such a way that you can't get to that level until you are 18. But in spite of that, they have a venue for gifted children. They still have routes that they can take to show, to utilize the exceptional academic abilities that they have. For example, in England, they can put them in certain programs. While in a particular school, they'll be in secondary school and doing university courses. There are many places in the US where they do that for gifted children. Even in Nigeria, we have schools for gifted children. But the thing is, so when they are gifted like that, what do we do to harness, those gifts? So maybe such children, even if they are allowed to go to university, cannot be maybe boarders. Maybe they stay under the tutelage of their parents or something, or they have a guardianship program in that institution that looks over that category of students. So yes, we can do that from primary school to say enough. Students who have not done primary 6 should not proceed to secondary school.
How can we verify this in a place?
That's exactly what I was going to say. But this is where the integrity of the average parent comes in. You know, sadly enough, and I say sadly, we live in a society where parents aid and abet even their children to go and cheat in examinations. So this is the problem. But the thing is, if we at least make an effort, that's where we have inspectors for schools. And then the way academics is done in Nigeria is changing. That's the evaluation. It's not only about the exam you write. It should be about the cumulative results. So what is the result of this child from primary 1 to primary 6? You must be able to show evidence of that before you can write a final exam. Okay. So those steps need to be put in place.
SS3 or SS2 now, and they are not up to 18. What are the programs that government should introduce to at least engage them before they get to the university? And when you look at the labor market in Nigeria today, most corporate organizations will tell you that you have to be 22, 23, with 10 or 5 years of experience before you can be employed.
So where will you get it?
Where will you get it?
Okay, so the thing is, that's what the problem with this is. There's nothing in place yet for children. I would sincerely advocate that we do A-levels in all Nigerian schools, whether private, because the few A-level schools we have in Nigeria, they are private and they cost an arm and a leg. So most parents cannot afford it. So, but the thing is, before we can do A-levels also, we need to train the teachers who will teach A-level curriculum. Right. So that's why this policy cannot take place overnight. It has to be well thought through, properly structured, and followed before we can achieve this desired goal of having our children 18. And then we need to talk to those ones, their problem is easier dealt with.
The employers? The
employers, yes. We just need to have Nigerian government call them into, say, look, it doesn't make sense if children enter school at 18 and they graduate at what age? 18 plus 4.
22.
22. And then you ask them for 5 years working experience at 25. Or some say once you are 35, they can't even employ you anymore. Those things don't make sense. But it's because they have a large pool to pick from. Because we have a lot of young people who came out too early and already started working. And because they want a lot of years in their work before they say for the women they want to go and have a baby or get married. That's why they came up with those things. That one is easily resolved with companies because it's our country. If we call all the stakeholders into the room and say, look, this is the situation. This is what we'd like to see going forward. And anyone who does contrary is working against us basically as a people, not even government. This Our children come out at this age, they're not going to get 5 years working experience by age 25. So you need to look into your policies. And I know the private sector, they're very quick at adapting to a situation that will go well for them. Because if they see that they will not get any government support or patronage, they will likely change their minds.
Right, so this pronouncement has been made, and of course the minister says from next year it will come into full implementation. But here we are talking about the merits and of course the disadvantages of this particular policy. What's your take on this? If we are to do it right, should it be delayed and done appropriately rather than just saying by next year it's going to start? So should the federal government and the Federal Ministry of Education backtrack and look at how this policy will succeed from the bottom approach rather than starting from where they intend to start from?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me state for clarity that this policy is actually something that NUC promulgated or decreed or started in 1999. So it's not a new policy.
Not new, right.
But the unfortunate thing is, even as Commissioner for Education, Science and Technology in 2010, I was not aware
Of the policy.
And I only became aware of this policy because I like to get my facts right when coming on a program like this. So I searched until I found it. When the minister made reference to the fact that it's not a new policy.
Right.
So I checked and I saw that it's not new. So because it's not new, but it has not been enforced and properly implemented, it means that another few years to correct this will not hamper things. Right. So if we start by pegging admission into primary school at a certain age, it will immediately affect those going to primary schools. And then we peg secondary school at a certain age, then we will achieve where we're going. So we're talking of about giving ourselves like 3 to 4 years to put this
in order
together. Because the risk of having children leave secondary school and have nowhere to go right now, to my mind, is greater. The danger out there, especially with drugs, is unimaginable. What will happen to children who have nothing to do? And in that time, this is something I've been screaming and I'm very passionate about. Let's establish more vocational schools where children can go and do a gap year or do something else. When I was training my children, it was important for me for them to go to one vocational training or the other during the holidays. Either they learned braiding, cake making, hat making, different things. They went every summer. And when they couldn't go for that, they went for a leadership training, maybe even outside the country. I always had them properly engaged. And in spite of that, they went to school early.
Okay, looking at our educational system generally now, Abimbola cited an example earlier that abroad, by the time you are 2 or 3 and you start going to kindergarten schools, you'll be painting and not reading. But here we lay so much emphasis on paper qualification and not skills. Isn't that a problem?
It's a problem, especially, but it's not entirely our fault. It's just that we need to come to the point where we recognize this problem. Let me explain with something I experienced. I noticed that when you talk to a child in the US, if you notice them at interviews, you ask them, what's your best subject? You know that what they would normally say? Maths. I used to wonder. And then some would say science. Why? Because it was brought home to them. It was something
it was
made simple. And I went for a World Bank training when I was Commissioner for Education. And one guy, Stephen Lewand, he came there and he said, mathematics is easy. It's a subject of proportions. Yeah, you're laughing, right? He said, oh, it is. He said, 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9. So 3 squared is 9. So 9 minus 3 is 6. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So once you can understand that this thing is a function of proportions, then it becomes easy. So, and then they now relate it to real life situations. I saw that that was where the problem was. Teaching it. When somebody comes to class and say, today we're doing quadratic equation. The name quadratic equation
already put you off.
It's like, what is exactly this quadratic? You know, so this is the issue. We need to simplify our curriculum to make it more adaptable to life situations. Unfortunately for us, the missionaries that were sent here were sent to teach us in a straitjacketed way. To just say, oh yeah, what is photosynthesis? Not take you outside and see the green leaves and show sunlight and tell you there's carbon dioxide in the air and everything is what provides food for this plant. The day I learned that the cornea in front of my eye is what you call, it doesn't have any blood vessel. That's the clear portion. And that the food it eats is the oxygen in the atmospheric air. It stayed in my brain for life. But if you had taught me in a class to just understand and say, oxygen is the food of the cornea, I will not pay attention. Yes. So what is also wrong with us is the type of education we got that lacked logical reasoning, any sensitivity to your society and how it merges. I remember when they taught us computer in university. We didn't have computer to practice on. So when I got, so when I got to do my master's was the first time I owned a computer. And my lecturer had the audacity to tell me that even if you don't know how to do anything by the time you finish this course, at least you'll learn how to use the computer. And trust me, I said, I beg your pardon. I said, if it was only computer I came to learn in England, then this education would not have been worth it. He said, I apologize. I said, apology accepted. So basically, that's the problem we have. Right. I remember I was at one National Council of Education as a commissioner, and they were going to make computer a compulsory subject in all secondary schools. I was the lone voice in the room. I rose and said, how? How can you make it compulsory when the children have no access to computer? Ironically, it was Ekiti State that had done computers for their students at that time. I was the one who implemented that policy for Dr. Kayode Fayemi. We had given computers to all our children in JS1 to SS3, and even the teachers. But I still understood the fact that they've only just gotten this computer.
They were not mastered.
Well, did they know how to use it properly first? But what about those schools that they don't even have a single computer in their school? How do you make education, computer compulsory for WAEC, for students? So these are the issues. Right. We need to change those things.
Time is fast spent. We need to go. We need to allow Dr. Ajayi take a leave. But before she goes, in 30 seconds, again, what would be your advice to parents who seem to think that this particular policy is not one that has the interest of the children at heart?
Well, I would say that they should hold their peace. That we have a way of resolving our problems in Nigeria. And that when we reason properly, good reason would be given the right of place. We're not saying minimum age of 18 is not good for university. We're just saying let's implement this holistically. Let's start from the roots. Let's not deal with this problem at the top. That's the wrong way to deal with this. I'm sorry. We need to deal with this properly at every segment of our education, so that we can achieve the results we want. Thank you.
That's the much we'll take this morning. Thank you so much, Dr. I'll say Ambassador.
Ambassador
Dr. Eniola Ajayi, former Commissioner for Education, Science and Technology, Ekiti State, also former Ambassador to the Netherlands. Again, we say thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
We'll take a quick break. The conversation returns with the Lagos ladies.